It's time for another Dice Tower review with John Richard.
Howdy gamers, greetings from Indianapolis, Indiana, the gaming capital of the world. It's time for another board game review with me, Indiana John. Today we're looking at a tiny little game called Qwixx, which is a fast family dice game, at least according to the folks here at Game Right Games. This was a game that was nominated for the Spiel des Jahres a couple of years ago, and so that's what made it catch my eye and made me pick it up. And let's see if it was worthy of that nomination. Let's take a look at the setup and gameplay of Qwixx and see if we can answer that all-important gaming question: is it fun? Now, the game of Qwixx is all about rolling dice and scoring points. And the way that you score points in this game is by crossing off boxes on these score sheets. So I wanted to start off by showing you what the score sheet looks like, because really the entire components of the game are a score pad and 6 dice. That's what you get in the box right there. So we'll talk about how you roll the dice in a second, but let's look at the score sheet. Over the course of the game, you have the opportunity to cross off numbers, and the more numbers you cross off, the more points you're going to get. You'll see that the red and yellow tracks here have numbers that go from 2 all the way up to 12, while the green and blue tracks have numbers that go from 12 down to 2. On your turn, you're going to have the opportunity to cross off numbers. And the big rule to keep in mind here is that as soon as you cross off a box on the score sheet, all of the numbers that are to the left of that box are now kind of locked out. You don't have the opportunity to check those off anymore. You always have to check off a box that's to the right of the last box that you checked. So it forces you to go kind of left to right in order. They even have these little arrows here to kind of point you in that direction. So you might have some difficult decisions to make. If you have a 4 checked off and then you can't ever seem to get a 5, 6, or 7 red, but an 8 red keeps coming up. Well, do you want to check that off now, which would lock out these numbers in the middle, or do you want to wait and kind of push your luck? So that is the tension of this game, is trying to figure out when to cross off numbers so that you can maximize the number that you end up with, because you're going to get points based upon the number that you check off. And it's not linear either. Like for 2, if you cross off 2 boxes, you get 3 points. If you cross off 10 boxes, you get 55 points. So that is the basic of the game here. And then there's also some penalties that you might accrue. So we'll talk about those in a second. Let's go over what a very simple turn in Qwixx looks like. So on your turn, the active player is going to roll all 6 of these dice. There are 2 white dice and then 1 die of each of the 4 colors in the game. The first thing that the active player will do, will take the white dice and put them together, and we'll make a number, in this case 4. This is a number that everybody has access to. So the active player and all the other players can choose to cross off a 4 on their score sheet. They don't have to, but it is an option to them if they want to. And that includes the active player. Then the active player is going to take 1 of the white dice and 1 of the colored dice, to make a combination of that particular color. So this would be a green 3 or a yellow 6. And then the active player only can cross off that number on their score sheet. That's an entire turn. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that if the active player at the end of their turn has not crossed off any number, they chose not to cross off this and they chose not to cross off one with the colors, then they have to take a penalty. And on the score sheet, you'll see that there is a block here for 4 blocks for penalties. And every time that you do that, it's going to be worth -5 points at the end of the game. This is also a way that the end game is triggered, because the moment that one player has crossed off 4 of their penalty boxes, then the game immediately ends. The other way that the game can end is if 2 dice get locked. You'll notice on the score sheet that it goes from 2 to 12 here, and then at the very end there's a little picture of a lock. The idea is that if you roll a 12 of yellow or red, or you roll a 2 of green or blue, then you have the opportunity to lock a die, in which case you would cross off the 12 here, and then you would also cross off the lock. And so that lock would count as another checkbox when you're scoring things. The only way that you're able to do this is if you've already crossed off at least 5 boxes prior to that. And if you've done that, then you can cross off the 12, cross off the X, or the lock, and then that particular color die is now removed from the game and can no longer be rolled. So the game will also end if 2 dice get locked. and then the game will immediately end and you'll do your final scoring. So that is pretty much the entire gameplay of Qwixx. As you can see, it's very quick. Sometimes in gaming there is beauty in complexity. Some of those real crunchy Euro games like Terra Mystica or Through the Ages, A Story of Civilization, you really get a great appreciation for the labor of love that the designer went through to be able to put together all the intricacy and detail that make a game great. But there's also a lot to be said for a designer who can create a very simple rule set, a very simplistic rule set that is engaging and is fun and has a little bit of strategy to it and can be played in a short amount of time. This is a real great niche of games that I enjoy quite a bit, and I think that Qwixx falls into that category very, very well. I was extraordinarily surprised by how much fun this was for my gaming group. You know, you're just rolling dice and putting together a couple of numbers. I really equate it almost to a game like Can't Stop, which, you know, the Sid Sackson classic, where you're just rolling dice, creating a couple of numbers, and moving pegs up on a board. And yet there's some tension to it, and there's some fun to it. There's the pressure luck aspect. Qwixx doesn't have a press your luck aspect to it, but it does have some strategy and decisions to make about when you're going to check those boxes off. And you would think that it would be just dumb and kind of procedural. But we had a great time playing it, and I really do enjoy it. I think it's great for families. I even saw that I think they've come out with some expansion score sheets for the game that sort of mix up the combination of the colors and the numbers, and things go in kind of different order, so it can give you some variety there. And I think I'm going to pick those up because I think it's just a great idea. So sometimes the best games are the simplest ones. I think this is a great nominee for the Spiel des Jahres, and I would recommend that you check it out. It's a lot of fun. Qwixx.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.